We are very excited to have this session right now and one more later today. But it is my distinct honor to introduce our host for today's session, Powwow Bound, and be joined by the wonderful, and I've heard Cheesehead herself, Amber Samdahl. Amber.
Thank you, Tim. Oh, I love that cheese header. I should have worn my cheese head. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the Powwow Bound Developing an Indigenous Video Game for Public Media session today. We are really excited to share with you about this collaborative effort that we have created. This has been a collaborative project between Nebraska Public Media and PBS Wisconsin. 2.5 years in the making. It's been a real passion project for all of us developing this game, Powwow Bound, a Menominee Homecoming. So as you're joining the session, we welcome everybody to put your favorite game in the chat. So you can start thinking about that, add that in there. We'd love to see what games you're playing. This could be video games, it could be card games, board games, whatever you like. So we'll go ahead and start with introductions and then dive in with the work that went into this project. So first, just to introduce, my name is Amber Samdahl. I'm the Director of Design and Innovation at PBS Wisconsin. And I will say my favorite game, well, maybe just for today, I recently got a Switch 2, and so I'm replaying Wind Waker, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, and loving it all over again. So I'm going to say Wind Waker. I'll turn over to Angelina.
Hi, my name is Angelina. I'm an interactive media producer with PBS Wisconsin, and I'm a huge D&D person. Now on to Chad.
Hey, y'all, I'm Chad Davis. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Nebraska Public Media, and along with Amber, we run the Public Media Innovators Peer Learning Community. I'm going to shamelessly plug the latest release. Believe it or not, Powwow Bound is not the latest release from Nebraska. After Powwow Bound dropped, we actually released the mobile version of our lighter weight game, Civic Scribble. And we talked about that on Monday a little bit, but I am enjoying working through the mobile levels on that. And yes, mobile is a completely different experience from the desktop version. Totally different game. On to Jacob.
Hello, my name is Jacob Schwitzer. I'm a first descendant of the Menominee Indian tribe. I'm also the game producer at Nebraska Public Media on this project. And you know what? I think I'm going to say my favorite game right now is Donkey Kong Bonanza on the Nintendo Switch 2. Very fun. But yeah, I'm going to throw it back to Chad to kind of talk about why making games in public media is an exciting venture.
Yeah, we wanted to kick off this kind of hour-long conversation ideologically first and foremost. We really wanted to sort of address what I think is kind of sometimes an elephant in the room, which is the idea that maybe public media organizations shouldn't be making games, or they're not, this is not the place for games to be happening. I would actually argue that there are way more public media game creators than we often think about, because I feel like as I've been trying to get to know this space over the last few years, there are a ton of games that are created, and they're almost all created in education departments. We often think about like games relative to PBS Kids, but then that ends up getting sort of boxed into like, well, that's a kids thing, or that's an education thing. And while what we are trying to do at Nebraska Public Media and in collaboration with PBS Wisconsin is to do general audience gaming, there are actually a surprising number of little independent gaming studios already baked into the public media systems. They're just in education departments. And so they get, I don't know, for some reason, not counted as game creators, which I think that is that's something we would very much like to start changing the perspective on. And I think just for all the reasons that education games are a hit, general audience games can be very much a part of the mission of public media. If you saw our session, Let's Talk Gaming on Monday, you saw Amber present a bunch of stats. I'm not going to go through those here. can watch that session or our June Public Media Innovators webinar. She went into a lot of stats too. And I really want to talk about the sort of ideology of a sector of the media economy that really needs our values. I think that's the biggest reason why we should be making games. That's one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to make a game that featured prominently Indigenous voices. I think, as I've said in other venues, everything that we do in terms of the why behind making linear video or linear audio is just as applicable to making games, whether they're big epic, 30-month productions, or whether they're 6 to 9 month lighter weight games, crossword puzzles, word games, things like that. There's an opportunity there to bring the values of public media into this space, and I think that is those values are missing. There is a sub-genre of gaming called Games for Good. And I think that's an area that we've already started embracing again through education departments, and that we can be doing so through general audience gaming as well. So that's kind of the why behind why Nebraska Public Media has embraced games, and why we brought PBS Wisconsin in on this particular collaboration. Amber will maybe go, or Angelina, next slide. I think I'm also supposed to tell you a little bit about how we kicked this off before we get into the nitty gritty of how we actually made it. And like a lot of good ideas, most good ideas, I'd say, the idea for this game was born out of a very organic process. It was a very, natural thing that came about with Jacob sharing a little bit about his culture on our departmental Discord. We do a lot of business, swapping files and all the things you do. It's like our Slack. We do a lot of that. But then it's also our water cooler. And Jacob was actually, remember this very clearly, sharing webcams that were documenting the annual migration of sturgeon. And that migration is very, very important to the culture of the Menominee. And I don't know if anyone's mentioned it here yet, but Jacob is Menominee. And so he started sharing this and started talking about his cultures, talking about his people. And I asked him at one point during a meeting we were having, hey, you wanted to maybe try to tell some of these stories like through game forms, because we were just at Nebraska starting to embrace experimentation with video games. We'd done VR, we had done some other interactive projects, but games were sort of the next frontier that we wanted to get into. And Jacob, having been someone who graduated with a degree in game design, was naturally very interested in that. So I asked him, hey, pitch me a few ideas. And he came back with 3. One we kind of discounted out of hand collectively. And then one was the one that became Powwow Bound. And then there was another one that was more of an origin story myth, kind of a creation myth for the Menominee people. And we kicked both of those around for a while. And ultimately, Jacob was very, I want to say passionate about, but also insistent. Like he really wanted to tell a story that was a modern representation of the Menominee people, not something that was fantastical or relied on magic reality or things like that. And so I said, okay, go ahead and flesh that out. The pitch was quite good. And parallel to this, we had been looking to find, and Amber and I have been looking for a project we could potentially do together. We knew we wanted to work together. We wanted to kind of bring the collective strengths of our stations together around something. And so we'd gotten really close with one idea and nicked it because it just ultimately didn't feel right. This one did feel right. And what I didn't know at the time was that PBS Wisconsin actually also had a significant commitment that they made to covering the tribes, I believe 12 tribes that are kind of situated within the political boundaries of what we call Wisconsin. And so this synced up perfectly. So suddenly we had 2 of the variables in place. The third variable was, of course, our funder, Vision Maker Media. And so once we knew we had all the players in place, we knew we had a general idea for the story, we approached Vision Maker because, again, our why. We feel like gaming is a space that needs public media's value. So we approached Vision Maker and pitched them on this. Kudos to Francine and her team. They did provide us with funding. We're very grateful for that. But also they provided us with a lot of patience because if they have funded a video game, it has been years and years since that happened. And so we went through an extensive process trying just to figure out how to get the money released. And because the agreements didn't exist. So we had to work through a lot of interesting sort of administrative hurdles to just create the avenue for something like this to happen on a funding basis. So once we had that in place, we knew we were a go, and we began to dig into the process, which Jacob and Angelina are now going to walk you through.
Yeah, so the game that came about is a modern depiction of the Menominee tribe. And ultimately, the elevator pitch was about experiencing the culture and traditions of the Menominee Indian tribe through a story set at our annual contest powwow. We wanted to represent the tribe in a modern depiction, something that's not often shown, and that was kind of the thesis for it. But for the overall design of the game, it is a 3D narrative-driven adventure game. It's built around interacting with a story about these people, very similar to games like Myst or Monkey Island. It's about interacting with characters, stories, their stories, and getting a general sense of the community there. This game we decided to design for general audiences, so anybody from fifth grade up to 50 years old who have that experience with video games, making sure that it was accessible to them. Um, it was a very different departure from creating an educational game because there were a lot less educational standards that were required of it. But this game, and we will talk about this later, ultimately still can be used as a teaching tool in classrooms because of the content that's in it. We also wanted to build it to be easily accessible to anybody. So we built it for web. This game lives on both Nebraska's website, PBS Wisconsin's website, and has the availability to be shared anywhere on any website, uh, just to allow as many folks the opportunity to get into it. And because we were building it for web, we made the game in the Unity game engine. It's one of the few game engines that still supports web and has a lot of functionality that is very helpful for that. Getting more into the nitty-gritty for the goals for Powwow Bound, we wanted to create an authentic representation of tribes in games. Often in video games, you will still see stereotypical depictions or depictions created without tribal input. And we wanted to take a better approach and actually bring members of the community in. That way we could service this community and maintain the collaboration that PBS Wisconsin has developed over last 50 years with the tribes in the state of Wisconsin. Uh, we actively practiced reciprocity and had community input within the project all throughout development. For the actual goals for the players, though, we wanted them to gain an authentic understanding of what this tribe is, what their culture is like, and the traditions that are typical around the powwow season. We also wanted players to experience fun gameplay, kind of born out of that experience of going through the powwow, and have fun whether or not doing actual quest objectives or just exploring the powwow grounds. We also lastly wanted our players to form a deep connection with the story and the characters throughout the game and really get a sense of what it's like living in this community. So with all that, we need to be able to create an authentic depiction by bringing in more community members. Even though I am Menominee, I can't, in good consciousness, represent the entirety of my tribe through my eyes. We need to bring in more than one perspective. So with that, we brought in knowledge keepers and many other Menominee folks onto the project by hiring them on as advisors, as a writer and a character designer. So we had a lot of Menominee input throughout this game, ranging from anywhere from beadwork, woodland floral art, cultural depictions and cultural general knowledge, as well as the dance styles that we were representing in this game, both women's traditional and women's fancy shawl. We also utilized Menominee language in this game, so we brought on a Menominee language expert to provide guidance on pronunciation and general usage throughout the narrative. And since it's a powwow, we would be remiss to not include that powwow music and that traditional drum. So we brought on an advisor as well from one of the drum groups from the Menominee tribe. And our writer, Justin Gauthier, he is a Menominee. He helped us out making the story the best that it could be and authentically depicting those personalities. And our character concept artist is also Menominee, and he helped design non-stereotypical depictions of Menominee people. But yeah, kind of diving a bit deeper into our development process, I'm going to throw it over to Angelina and she'll begin talking about how this worked across stations.
Yeah, so this was both a long development cycle in this game, 2.5 years, as well as a very ambitious in scope by our standards game, and it required a lot of coordination between teams at two separate media stations, public media stations. The folks at Nebraska Public Media handled the entirety of the programming work in Unity, a good majority of the 3D artwork, as well as a lot of the final audio assets. While us at PBS Wisconsin, we ended up working a lot on, we provided an art director. We did a majority of the UI work and then also pitched in on some of the 3D artwork. Of course, this did require quite a bit of communication, quite a bit of coordination. We had to figure out what communication channels we would use. We ended up settling on Discord, which was what NPM was using, as well as using Zoom. We met at a bare minimum with the entire team once per week, but oftentimes we were meeting more often than that in individual groups dedicated to each aspect of the development. So there would be a programming meeting, a UI meeting, an art meeting, a narrative meeting, and so on, just to make sure that we were really coordinating on what we were doing across teams. We were also using software such as Google Drive to pass files back and forth to one another, as well as using software called Airtable, which is a combination database spreadsheet that allowed us to track our assets and assign them to individual team members to handle. So once we had decided the collaboration, how this collaboration was going to look, we jumped into our research. So beforehand, we had to really do our research on the Menominee tribe and the cultural environment that we were attempting to depict. So that involved multiple trips up to the reservation, going to see places such as the Woodland Bowl, which is where the powwow happens, as well as Legend Lake, which is the setting for our family's lake lot campsite, as well as other locations we didn't end up featuring, such as the college and the falls, but are still important places to the tribe. We also talked, of course, with people up on the reservation, tried out traditional games such as the moccasin game, and of course, visited the actual powwow. Once we had our research, we gathered together in person on the reservation at the college to do a design charrette in order to gather and brainstorm ideas of how this game could look like, feel like, and play like. We had folks there from both PBS Wisconsin and Nebraska Public Media, as well as our writer, who, as Jacob mentioned, is a member of the tribe. Here are some photos from that experience. After we gathered up our all the different ideas, we were able to come up with the initial concept. So I will pass that on to Jacob to talk more about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we kind of landed on from that design charrette was creating gameplay centered around visiting at the powwow and visiting with relatives during that event. Often with the powwow, you'll have the opportunity to talk with your family, so that required a gameplay element for dialogue. And that way we could also utilize our narrative and communicate that to players. It's a very common trope in video games, but it still needed to be designed from the ground up for this project. Additionally, at the powwow, you'll often have folks taking photography of the dancers or the environment. We decided to include that as one of our gameplay elements as well, not only to show off our recreation of the powwow grounds, but also to show off the art artistic details that our art team created. We also employed fetch quests, which we are calling gopher quests in this game, because every time you talk to a relative, they'll say, "Hey, go for this for me real quick. Go get me some fry bread or some chili or a soda." So they will send you to go pick up some items because they are currently too busy dealing with either a powwow stand or watching a relative dance to go do it themselves. And then, of course, being set at a powwow, we needed to include some form of the dances there. So we created a dance mini game to highlight the traditional forms that are being shown off there. On top of this, getting kind of into the scope attributes, we did cut some gameplay elements. We cut a rendition of the moccasin game that we were working on, as well as a beading mini game, working with one of the uncles who sells beadwork at the powwow. But the biggest element for this game was the narrative. Uh, if you're making an adventure game, you're going to need a story to drive everything. And if we could get to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit more about how we approached that. So we came into this project with the understanding that we were going to depict something at the powwow in the Woodland Bowl on the Menominee Reservation. But in order to kind of authentically tell about the culture and traditions, we wanted to depict it through the eyes of an urban Indigenous family who doesn't live on the reservation anymore and is only able to come up and meet with relatives and experience that every so often. Um, this allows us to kind of approach it with a fresh lens for non-Indigenous folks and also a sense of familiarity for Indigenous folks as well. The key themes for this project were a sense of returning home, highlighting the importance of family, understanding one's identity, and having a sense of reconciliation and reunification for this whole family. So ultimately, we landed on this notion of this character named DJ. While attending the Menominee Annual Contest Powwow for a dance special honoring her grandfather, she uncovers her mom's past as a traditional dancer and works to help her rejoin this dance circle. And with that story now in place, we developed characters around that concept. So each of these characters are meant to help tell about the story, show off aspects of the powwow and Menominee characteristics, and kind of feed into the narrative that's being done here. So DJ, or Deborah Joe, is our player character. She's a 15-year-old girl. She kind of represents some of the more modern Indigenous women that are typical nowadays. They're a bit more tomboyish, but they still have an excitement for some of the female aspects and roles of the tribe. With that, we also have her younger brother, Aaron, who starts off as your stereotypical 11-year-old boy, obsessed with finding Wi-Fi and being on his tablet, but he knows a lot more than he lets on, and he's keeping an eye on the family going-ons that are happening. Of course, we have our mom character, Laura, who ultimately this is her story, but we're learning about it through her daughter's eyes. That way we can condense an entire lifetime of a journey back into this dance circle over the course of a shorter game. Uh, and of course, we have her husband, Eric, who is not a Menominee person, but is very supportive and represents that non-Menominee perspective and often the support that folks will receive from them. Of course, you got to have a grandma. Elmira is the matriarch of the family. She is the most knowledgeable. She has the most amount of wisdom, and she really comes into the story at the point where DJ needs the information to help her mom get back into the circle. Gerald and Robert are Laura's brothers. They represent some additional components of the family, but also represent the kinds of people you will see working at the powwow. Gerald is a beadwork vendor. He works and sells his own beadwork at the powwow. and Robert runs his own fry bread stand and food stand, which is very typical at the powwow. And lastly, we have Shawnee, who is Gerald's daughter. She represents the modern dancer and kind of what Laura used to be. So with all these characters, we are able to tell this narrative through character interactions and kind of drop in elements of the culture throughout. But now that we have this story, we're going to need the art to tell this story. So I'll throw it back to Angelina to talk about that.
For our art style, we end up going with a more stylized 3D look for a number of different reasons. The first reason is that it is less time-consuming for us to do than doing something more photorealistic. The second reason is that a lot of times these stylized art styles do age better in comparison to more realistic styles. We're always sort of pushing the boundary of realism in terms of graphics. So what looks really cutting edge today is probably going to look outdated in another couple of years, but something more stylized from 10 years ago is probably still going to look really good in another 10 years. So after we decided on our initial style, we did start doing concept art. So these are environment concepts of some of our different environments: the lake lot campsite, the woodland bowl, and the vendor's row area. And then here is some key art that was created for us. We sort of combining the environment concepts as well as the character concept art. And I will show you more about the character concepts here. I'll walk you through the development of one of our characters. This is, as Jacob was mentioning, our mom character, Laura. So we can see the sort of the starting point is just once we have the general character idea from our writer, we started doing sketches, explorations of what this character could look like, what are her general vibes. And then we sort of move on to doing sort of pose explorations, facial explorations for this character. And once we have a good idea of what this character is supposed to look like, then we can create what is a character model sheet. So this is going to be the character doing a T-pose, front, back, and side views that our 3D modelers can then work off of to translate her from a 2D drawing into a 3D model. One of the other really interesting things about Laura's character design is that she is one of two characters in this game, along with Shawnee, the cousin, who wears regalia at one point. Regalia poses an interesting challenge for us because regalia you can't just take a piece of regalia that exists in real life and then just copy it, digitize it, and call that a day. Most regalia is something that is deeply personal. It has significance to the individual, their family, their tribe. So it would be inappropriate for us to base Laura's regalia entirely off of someone's a piece of regalia that already exists. So what we ended up doing was we had our woman's traditional dance advisor, who's also our cultural advisor. She had experience doing applique designs, so she went ahead and created a custom applique design for us, and then we were able to use it as a basis for the regalia designs for both Laura as well as our other character who wears regalia. We worked with our two dance advisors, both the woman's traditional and the woman's fancy shawl, to create these pieces to create these regalia pieces, making sure that it is correct and is something that these characters would wear if they were real people. Now we can see, once we have all the 2D character concepts, character model sheets done, we can start converting our 2D art to 3D models. Here is mom, Laura, untextured, and here she is with textures on. And then after that, it's time to make our characters move, or in this case, dance. So as you can see, we filmed our dance advisors dancing both in regalia and just in plain clothes. And then we use those videos as a basis to animate our in-game characters. So that was our woman's fancy shawl dancer. Besides the characters, we also had the environment to build. What was really important to us was recreating the powwow environment as faithfully as possible. That meant both making sure that we were you having recreating important landmarks and places in the environment, such as the Welcome to the Woodland Bowl sign, as well as we also wanted to have traditional crafts represented because that is a part of what is being sold at the powwow. And it is also our in-game uncle is running a beading stand. So we license beading designs from our beading advisor, digitize them, and then use them within the environment, as well as other important aspects of the powwow. It's not a powwow without drum music. So we made sure to have drums in the powwow. If you go down to the bottom of the Woodland Bowl in-game, you'll find the drum circles drumming away. And the final component of our visuals is our UI. For the UI, we wanted to sort of carry through a lot of the aesthetics of the environment, so a lot of wood, a lot of woodland floral art, and use these in our UI as well. So we can see here some examples of how we did that with the wood seaming, with the use of the woodland floral. What was also important for us in terms of UI and art was also starting to think about accessibility. So here's a sample of our settings page, as well as some of our different accessibility settings. So it was important to like have good colored contrast between the background and the text, for example, to have the text at a size that meets accessibility standards, as well as having like the fonts be readable, easily readable. So no fancy cursive fonts, unfortunately, or fortunately. As well as just different options that you can see here if one needs them. So here is our first gamification code. It is going to be Powwow Bound, no space. I will leave this on screen for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now let's go on to Jacob to talk more about the technical development.
Yeah, so happening in parallel with the art side of things, we have our technical side of the project. This is encompassed by our design phase, our prototyping phase, and production phase. Each of these elements are happening in parallel with the art and the narrative, and the overall goal is to, one, start outlining our mechanics, creating the first versions of our mechanics, and then iterating upon those as we continue through development. So diving a bit deeper into these aspects, in our design phase, the primary goal is to create these design documents, outlining not just the mechanics, but the overall composite of the systems that will be utilized in the game. The living design document contains that overview of all the game elements, so gameplay, audio, art, etc., and that will continue to be updated as you move through development. In addition, you will also supplement these designs with one-page design documents, which are a deep dive into those specific game mechanics. These kind of encompass what do the visuals look like, what is the feel of the game, and what are the rules that we're playing by here. And once you have all those, you're able to move on into your prototyping phase, where you begin taking the paper prototypes of the living design document and one-page design document and programming them into the first versions of your game systems. Right here, you see two of our cut games, our beating game prototype and our mox game prototype. Both of them started off as one-page design documents, but as we continued to develop, they evolved into actual existing software within Unity. So on the left, you have our version of the beating game where you're able to move around and select beads to match the design on there. And then on the Moccasin game, you have our prototype for actually playing this realistic game in a digital space. If you can't tell, both of these are using programmer art. It's a matter of getting that together first and then moving on into the production phase. So you see continued refinement and continued iteration upon these mechanics through testing, bug fixing, and developing features. Off to the left, you see our video kind of showing how our mechanics started off and then how they evolved over the course of development. So this is the prototype for our third-person player controller and our final version. Some of the markers for this phase of development are creating your alpha build, your beta build, and your launch build, each working their way up to the first testable version of the game, the most feature-locked version of the game, and then the most stable version that you would release. Moving on to another component of the development phase, we have our audio. Because we wanted this game to be authentic, we actually went out and recorded audio from the powwow at two different instances, so in 2023 and 2024. And we utilized that within the game. Additionally, because we're using Menominee language in the game, we hired on voice actors to actually record those elements and make sure that they were spoken as they were intended. We also utilized one of our voice actors as one of the powwow MCs, which you'll hear right here.
Friends and relatives from far and wide, welcome to one of the premier dance arbors in the world, the Woodland Bowl.
Yeah. And then after we get through all of those development phases, we move over into playtesting.
Yeah, so for playtesting, it's important to playtest early and often. You should get started even if your game still has white cylinders with people's faces slapped on it in place of actual characters. So what we ended up doing was doing a lot of mini playtests. These were focusing on individual aspects of the game, such as game and camera controls, the initial introduction to the narrative, or the dance mini game, just to get a feeling for how people were receiving these core parts of the gameplay. And this was really important for us to make sure that these were solid before we moved on to later phases of development. Of course, we still do need to do full game playtesting at some point. A lot of times when we're testing these little bits separately, people are lacking important context. So full game playtesting is where this comes in. This is later into development where the gameplay experience is far more complete. And these take a long time to do. So they were typically 2 hours per session, which meant we got fewer people through, but it provided us a lot of really useful information about what the overall experience of gameplay was. Both of these early segments of gaming were invite only for the playtesting, and this is simply just because when you start just because to establish the expectation that people will be seeing unfinished pieces of gameplay, so that they will come into your playtesting sessions with that already in mind. Once we did have a public beta that we felt good about releasing to the general audience, we made that available online, as well as a feedback form that they could fill out. And then we just had that out there for the public beta playtesting. So one of the really big strengths of the public beta, this sort of playtesting, is that's very, very low effort on our part. We just have to put the game up, put the feedback form up, maybe send out a few emails, and then watch the feedback come back in. This isn't the 2 hours that we need to dedicate to these full playtesting sessions. But there are some weaknesses to this as well. And that is, as you can see here, your playtesters are you're getting who you're going to get. You can't really curate your playtesters. So for example, in our playtest, we found that our playtesters were unfortunately overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male for this public beta, which is why community playtesting ends up being very important. So for that, let's pass it back to Jacob.
Yeah, and with community playtesting, we were able to get back into the Menominee community and get the feedback that we wanted, culturally speaking, for the game. So we worked with Lawrence University in their Native Alliance, doing a little bit of playtesting with them, as well as hosting a 3-day playtesting session at the Menominee library at the local college. This was entirely meant to help make sure that everything was authentic culturally and that we were getting everything right in the game. Additionally, we spoke about this earlier, but even though this game was made for general audiences, we wanted to make sure that there were educator resources for this game. Within the state of Wisconsin, there is Act 31, which requires that the history of Indigenous cultures within the state, all 12 tribes, are taught in the schools. So we worked with PBS Wisconsin's education department to create an educator's guide on how to utilize this game in the classroom to facilitate some of that instruction. And after all of this stuff that we have just talked about, we were able to create and release our launch version of the game. So we'll share the trailer here so that you can see how it ended up.
PBS Wisconsin and Nebraska Public Media present Powwow Bound, a Menominee Homecoming, a narrative-driven, web-based adventure game. Step into the life of DJ as she embarks on a journey to reconnect with her Menominee heritage. Experience the Menominee Nation contest powwow through DJ's eyes. Feel the energy of the powwow. Learn about dancing and test your rhythm. Practice your photography in a captivating scavenger hunt. Explore rich 3D environments and meet dynamic characters while celebrating the culture of the Menominee Nation. Powwow Bound, a Menominee Homecoming. Mamachik Tawaks Kwaya. Everyone is going home.
And with that game ready for release, Nebraska Public Media and PBS Wisconsin partnered to distribute that game and show it off at the actual powwow grounds this year in August. As a Menominee person, this was personally the highlight of my year. Being able to see the feedback that we got from folks was wonderful. But I will throw it to Amber to talk more about the perspective of PBS Wisconsin and that relationship with the tribes.
Thanks, Jacob. I will say as a non-Menominee person, it was also the highlight of my year. Watching Jacob be celebrated was especially rewarding. He was, you could see a picture of part of his fan club there at the top. It was an incredible weekend. We felt so very welcomed. It felt, honestly, I think the best description I've heard is it felt like a big family reunion. Being able to be at the powwow and sharing a game about the powwow was just extremely heartwarming and full of joy. You can see a lot of pictures of kids playing, and then they'd run off and get their grown-ups and bring the grown-ups back, and you'd see the grown-ups kind of come in, maybe a little skeptical at first. What is a video game? And then their jaws would drop when they saw the game, and then they'd be running off and getting people. It was just an incredibly moving experience. Something that I know I will never forget. I also just want to extend a thank you, Jacob and his whole family. Through the entire experience, you could see some pictures in here. We're just so welcoming to all of us. Rather than me talk about the community response, I think it's more important that you hear from them. So we have a little video here to share about that.
So this game was inspired by the love that I have for my culture, the Menominee tribe, and wanting to provide a source of media that represented them authentically in a modern depiction. Often in video games, you don't see authentic depictions of Indigenous folks. So our intent was to create something that showed a better path forward for creating Indigenous media while also lifting up the voices of the Menominee tribe.
It was pretty emotional, honestly. I didn't grow up seeing a lot of people that looked like my family on TV or movies or, definitely not in video games or anything like that.
Honestly, it's something that I never thought that I would ever experience, truthfully. This is just something that we experience as a culture together. So to see us in a video game, our powwow and our reservation being represented in such a great way, in a positive way, I love it.
My kids and my little young cousins and all the Nichianuk are going to be able to play a game where there's people that look like you, people that look like your family, people that sound like you and talk like you.
What I love is that I'm seeing just being here as kids are saying, "Hey, that looks like my auntie," or "That I know that person. I've been there."
Like a 10 out of 10. You get to walk around the powwow and do these quests.
It's truly, it just makes my heart happy. That's why I had to bring these guys to come see. I was just so amazed that we have a video game of our land with the bowl.
It's a big thing, it kind of makes you feel, seen and represented.
I had so much fun.
Yeah, so continuing on that wonderful release, we are working towards a desktop version of the game to release on Steam, which is a game distribution platform that will have some additional improvements. We're also working on a Menominee language translation, working with the Language Institute on the reservation, and hoping that that can be used as a tool to help revitalize the language with the tribe. We're also looking for other ways that we might utilize this IP and connect with other tribes and Indigenous game designers to help tell their stories as well. And continuing to share this with educators to make sure that this can continue to be a helpful tool in the classrooms. But if folks are interested in adapting this model, please reach out to Amber or Chad. They would love to talk about how to adapt this with your communities as well.
And then lessons learned, there were a lot along the way. You've heard some throughout the presentation today. First and foremost, for any interactive project or game, playtest early and playtest often. We can't stress that enough. Don't be afraid to go out there with paper, with, programmer art, as we like to say, and just start testing really early. You'll save time in the end and learn a lot very quickly. Building in accessibility first, so making sure that's part of the game design document from the beginning, and how we're approaching everything about the design and the experience is important to be thinking about that first, so it doesn't feel like an add-on in the end and make it a whole lot harder for everybody. So we definitely advocate for that. Advisor collaboration, as you heard and saw throughout the presentation, was critical to the success of this project. And that was something, we knew we had to invest in and start that early. The research, the time for the conversations, making sure we built in time for reviews and being able to take, feedback and iterate. And of course, paying our advisors was really important to us. Aligning the teams early on around the same goals. We're two different organizations, two different styles of working. That was really important. I think we found that pretty early. That passion for this project really came together around those same goals. Aligning the tools across the teams. Angelina talked about that earlier. And then really investing in those long-term community relationships. So Chad mentioned at PBS Wisconsin here, we've had a long investment in working with our tribes within Wisconsin, and that is something that we could not have done this project without the people that were in PBS Wisconsin long before me, and all of us, to be able to build on those relationships and have already established that trust was really important. So that's not something we could have just dove into without all the work from decades and decades before. And then the last thing, it's not on the slide, but I have to also shout out another thing that I would add, lessons learned, things that I highly recommend. Have a team that's incredibly, passionate and cares deeply about the project, and led by two superstars, Jacob and Angelina, I have to shout out here, are both current rising stars. And so clearly, as you saw today, led by some incredibly brilliant people. So, kudos again to Jacob and Angelina there.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. So as we're going to the Q&A, please feel free to try out this game. It's available online at pbswisconsin.org/powwow. Hopefully someone is dropping this into the chat so that everyone can get the link. Finally, your last gamification code is video game, no space. So I think that is the presentation. Thank you, everyone. We have any questions?
Do not see any questions at this point in time. Thank you all for this amazing presentation and for the game. This is absolutely wonderful. I think it's an important thing to continue this, and thanks for the partnership too. This is another perfect example of stations collaborating with each other and collaborating with their community, which is such a great absolute thing. So one question as we end this, Jacob, I know you shared a little bit what this meant to you as it started and you were a part of it. What does it mean now? You've presented it now. It's out there. How does it feel now to you?
I truly feel like we accomplished our goal of authentically depicting the tribe. Being able to see tons of young people over the weekend of the powwow just come up and point at the screen and say, "Hey, that's me," or "Hey, that's my auntie." When looking at NPCs was truly, truly wonderful. Um, you know, just being able to give them a video game that they can see themselves in, I think, is the great accomplishment here.
We have another question here. Sorry if they missed this, but how do you imagine the game will be played in their families, in homes, educators, in the community? How do you envision this game being utilized?
Any of those ways. We've had a lot of our advisors say, "Oh yeah, I've played this game with my kids as you guys were making it." Um, we've also worked with some educator folks around the Menominee tribe and local communities. They're interested in bringing that directly into the schools and using that as a resource. And then again, having it available in whatever community settings we can have, just by having it up on the websites.
Wonderful. Another one here. This is to Amber and Chad. As you started conversations about a collaboration, how did you decide that a game was the right format for telling the story versus another interactive format?
Well, I think partly because Amber and I work extensively in the kind of emerging media space, we were already leaning in that direction. The idea I referenced earlier that we'd gotten close on, but nixed, was an augmented reality uh, concept that would be anchored around our different college campuses. So we're kind of already thinking beyond video, beyond linear audio. And Amber has some background in game design and production already, and kind of that's how we sort of leaned toward this particular concept and this particular medium for telling the story. Also, just to stress, Jacob's degree is in game design, so like this is the medium he is trained to communicate in. So
I would add to that. I completely agree, and I would add to that something that Jacob said earlier, and feel free to add, please, Jacob, that Indigenous voices are underrepresented in video games. The stories and cultures told authentically by Indigenous people is an area that is lacking, and so it felt like a calling to be able to support that work too. But Jacob, feel free to add to that.
Yeah, any way that we can continue to lift up those voices in this medium, I'm hopeful that can help provide better representation there. But yeah, and also speaking to, again, the overall team makeup, having folks that are trained in this profession is very important. Angelina went to school for game design. I went to school for game design, so it was just a perfect matchup to run this project together.
I'll
Excellent.
throw in one of the things we found as we were making this game is there are a lot of actual small indigenous studios or creators. We are talking with one now who is Ojibwe based in Wisconsin, teaches in Minnesota, but there are other creators out there. So just like there are independent filmmakers in our communities, there are independent game creators in our communities. And one of the things we're looking at now going into 2026 is how do we support indie game studios locally, just the same way that we've always supported independent video or audio creators.
That's awesome. One of the other comments is the cut mini games both look fun. Any plans to eventually implement them?
For the Steam release, we were considering those. But again, looking at the scope time, unfortunately, they will not be in the Steam release. But we will be making some additional changes to the dance minigame, so keep an eye out for that. And perhaps if we get some additional funding for DLC in the future, we can look at adding those mini games back in.
Amber and I are both very interested in adding this back in. The big thing about the Steam release is we had to get everything ready for it by now, because we have to release it in October. And so just the prep that you have to do for that sort of thing we wouldn't have been able to get the additional production done and tested in a way. So I think it's still out there on the horizon. We've not ruled it out.
All right, we have time for final words, and we'll kind of go around the horn. Angelina, then Jacob, Amber, and Chad.
Wow, you guys are really putting me on the spot. No, this was a great experience. Getting work. This was my first job actually at Wisconsin, at PBS Wisconsin. So what an intro it was. I remember my first day on the job. Amber and Philip, who is the head of our AEI Animation Environment Interactives team, grabbed me, put me on a van, and then drove me up to the Menominee Reservation to get working on this project. So that was definitely one way of getting started in this role. That was a really great experience. Really great to be working with folks from Nebraska. It's also, from what I understand, a fairly uncommon experience to get to have. So I'm really grateful that I was able to be a part of this as my first real project here.
As my first professional game, it's been wonderful working across stations and learning, best practices at PBS Wisconsin and our best practices here for approaching development. I've definitely learned a lot about producing. I'm a software developer by trade, so this is my first time doing anything like this. But it has been wonderful being mentored from both sides and getting the experience here. And for anyone who's considering doing cross-station projects, try it out. There's a little bit of growing pains trying to figure out what software to use together, but ultimately we're all within the same system. We all have the same values. I think it's beneficial to begin looking at those in the future.
I would second that as well. This project has been just incredibly rewarding. I've learned so much from everyone on the screen and the large team that is represented through those project credits. Can't thank the larger team enough for the dedication. We kind of started this off. We had never made a game internally in-house before. So we're kind of inventing along the way, as well as partnering with another organization. But I think what we were intending to do, we not only succeeded, but exceeded our expectations too, with the goal of kind of showing the public media system that this is possible, and that we want to help kind of invent the future here, that games can be part of that. And to do it with such a tremendous, passionate team has just been incredibly rewarding.
For my part, what I guess I'll say is we talk a lot in public media about younger audiences, getting younger audiences involved, youth voices. I am a big admirer of the work that Student Reporting Labs does from the platform that NewsHour provides them. But in this instance, Jacob, Angelina, the kind of co-producers, this is Gen Z. And games, that is, as we've talked about, the oldest gamers are Gen X now. But games is a medium that younger folks are communicating through. And so if you want to really target younger audiences, you've got to give younger creators a voice. And I think the thing that I'm perhaps most proud about here is that we were able to accomplish that. And Amber and I working together kind of both have a real interest in this and are aligned in supporting young creators this way. And so for me, this is a huge success because we're modeling the behavior we want to see in the public media system.
That is awesome, and congratulations to all of you. This is great. And as a Gen Xer, Chad, I lose every time I play a game. So both of my younger children beat me very easily. But thank you all. Great job. We look forward to seeing more from this collaborative group. And thank you to everybody that joined. Take a moment at the end of the day to fill out your survey. Let us know. And please connect with everybody in this session to figure out how you can implement things like this right in your community. This is important. And we will see you at our next breakout session in about 15 minutes. Have a great day.